After disliking last week's episode so much, I was kind of afraid that I would just hate this series from now on and it just kind of wouldn't be a show for me, but I was gonna watch it because I love Lord of the Rings so much, so I just, I'm more curious than anything, like a morbid fascination, like what kind of horrors am I gonna see this week? Whereas I was pleasantly surprised. I had quite a lot of fun watching this episode. It's not the best thing I've ever seen. I feel like anytime I think about it in House of Dragon, I keep going, oh, but House of Dragon's doing this and this right, and this is... So I'm trying to separate all of that and just enjoy it for what it is. One, just a beautiful looking show. It just looks so good. You can see that money really being spent for the most part. It looks really, really gorgeous. Some of the actors and actresses I'm really enjoying. Like some of the characters I'm really, really enjoying. But overall, I just had a bit of fun with it. But I'm not sure. Is that just because I've chosen to be more optimistic and less kind of pessimistic and like, oh, I don't like this, but it's not what I want it to be, mindset? Or am I just in a better mood today? Or is it because there is a final in the AFL tonight and my team's playing and I am stressed beyond belief? I can't tell you how stressed I am. If we win this, we're in the grand final and I won't be able to sleep for an entire week. It's all I can think about, so maybe I'm just trying to think about that, so I don't have the energy to be angry at something, so I don't even know if it's good or not. Or is it because the Hobbits weren't in this episode? Because that improved things a lot. Quite a lot. Although, it's kind of a double-edged bladed, it's a double-edged sword. It's a double-edged sword kind of situation with the Hobbits, because on one hand, the Hobbits not being in an episode is like, good, I don't have to see all those gypsy traveling hobbits that I just don't really like, and the whole thing is just not working for me whatsoever. Characters, humor, just all of it not working for me. But on the other hand, when we don't get them, we also don't get potentially young, sexy Gandalf. And I know he's not young or sexy, and he's probably not Gandalf, but I'm very intrigued by young, sexy Gandalf. And what's he going on? The fire was all cold. Is he evil? Or is he one of the blue wizards or something like that? I don't know. I'm fascinated by this wizard character. So, we didn't get any further in Is It Young, Sexy Gandalf? Definitely not young or sexy, but maybe is he Gandalf? Is he Gandalf? So we didn't get any further with that, but also no hobbits. So, the double-edged sword thingy, you know that metaphor. So this episode, prisoner elf character gets to meet with the father of the orcs, Adar. And immediately I'm just like, is this Sauron? Is this Sauron? This has got to be Sauron, right? And I find that really fascinating and interesting. I'm really hoping it is, but then I'm also like, oh, maybe it's not. It'll just be like a fun misdirect or something. But the whole idea of just this like sexy, charismatic character comes in and all the orcs are like bowing to him and just like treating him with this kind of, he was like a god to them. And just this whole thing was super fascinating and mysterious and interesting because on one hand I'm like, wait, is he like some kind of like sexy orc? Or is he like an orc/elf? Or is he just like an elf that's scarred? And I really like the idea of having a sexy scarred Sauron. I mean, for all that SSS, that soliloquy? That word where you say the same letter a bunch, it sounds good off the tongue. But yeah, just generally love the idea of a sexy scarred Sauron. Just can't get enough of it. Found the actor really, really good. I think it might be too obvious that it's Sauron because all the orcs are like, father. Well, they're not saying that. But then like the elf prisoner, our elf character man, Archie boy, he's all like, why do they call you father? So I have to imagine that Adar or Adair or whatever they call him, that means father in Orcish or whatever language the orcs are speaking. So I don't know, all of that really, really fascinating. I love that he's like, all these Southland men, you could, join me and you leave these lands, but join me, it'll be all good, or I'll kill you all. Pretty stock standard kind of evil stuff. I thought it was going to be a bit more like, I don't know, I thought there would be more to it, because he's like, I've got a plan for all these men, tell them my plan, and then it cuts and I'm like, ooh, what's he going to say? Oh, join me or I'll kill you? That's pretty standard evil guy behavior. But okay. I mean, this is set way back on. They haven't, watched the TV in the early 2000s to know that that's very cliche. So our lead elf character gets set free by Sexy Scarred Sauron, maybe not Sauron, mysterious orc father man, and he goes back to other characters, I've forgotten what their names are again, just Blue Dress Lady and her son at the Watchtower. And he comes at perfect time to rescue the Blue Dress Lady's son, the guy with the Morgul blade, or the evil Sauron blade of doom and destruction and probably corruption of some type, in a sequence which I can only describe in the most polite way as like a video game sequence where he's like, I gotta go do a little side quest, get some chow. it'll be real dangerous, but I'll be fine because, you know, I'm not going to die right now. He goes, he does the side quest, he gets the food, but then he has to do like a sneaking mission, and we get this one shot, which I think is meant to be kind of entertaining. It was probably my least favorite part of the episode, because it kind of felt like they were trying to, you know, do more than they could kind of do, or just the decision to do it in the one take made it all feel a little staged, choreographed. Like the camera would move and an orc would be like, ooh, what's that sound I hear? And then they turn, but he's fallen into like the shrubbery, like he's sneaking and like tall grass. He's playing Ghost of Tsushima or any video game ever. And it all just had that kind of air of just video game sneak mission in the worst way. I didn't really like any of that. The orcs do look amazing though, so for the most part, I'm happy just to see them on screen being all like, you know, doing that orc slick, you know, thingy. But yeah, didn't really like that. It's kind of the only action scene we get for the episode, so that kind of leaves like a bit of a kind of taste in my mouth as well. But generally speaking, all the action scenes have been kind of underwhelming. I'm trying to more focus on, you know, the characterization of building up these characters so that if we do get like a big battle later, I care about the characters in the battle, which I think is more important. And I think some of the character work in this episode, at least for some of the characters, is getting a lot stronger. Or maybe I'm just kind of buying into the world a bit more than I was in the first 3 episodes. For me, my favorite characters so far are still Galadriel and Elrond. I'm really enjoying them. This episode is the first episode where I'm watching Elrond knowing that that actor who's playing young Elrond was the one who played young Ned Stark in Game of Thrones flashbacks. And I don't know if it's just because I loved him in those like tiny couple of scenes we got. I just thought he did such a good job of kind of doing what Sean Bean was doing, but kind of bringing a younger, different vibe to it. And just, I don't know, I was so obsessed with the show at that point. I was just like, oh, young Ned Stark. So the idea that he's also doing young Elrond, playing younger versions of these two hugely iconic characters like in my life, I don't know, I'm just really vibing with that. I just feel like, I don't know, I'm now just super on board with him. I feel like every time he does a line delivery, I'm like, oh yeah, I really like this actor, this character. And I don't know, I find him really heartwarming and sincere, and yeah, just a kind man. And I just really like all of his stuff with the dwarves. I will say though, and this might just be because I've just recently, and by recently I mean like this week, because recently is like every 3 months you could pretty much go back up in, I watched Lord of the Rings again, but I most recently, and it's something that like, you know it, but then you forget just because, you know, my mind's got a lot of things going on, mostly stressing about the AFL finals tonight. I went, oh god, oh, I'm going to the stadium to see it live. So I'm so stressed. I cannot stress enough how stressed I am. So Rings of Power. One thing I noticed when rewatching Lord of the Rings that I did remember when the dwarves showed up again, and I'm not even sure if this is like a Peter Jackson thing that he just did in the movies, because I don't know about the Tolkien lore and all that stuff, but there's a great scene where Gimli's talking about like dwarven wives and dwarven women, and he's talking, it's like, sometimes they get us mixed up, it's because of the beards, and then they thought there were no dwarf women, and then we just sprouted out of the ground, but of course that's ridiculous, and you know, he does a whole thing. You know, watch Two Towers, it's great, he's fantastic in it. And so every time there's a dwarven woman on screen, it's good, I'm not hating it, I just keep wondering how much better would it be if they had beards. I just really like the idea. Maybe it's that nostalgia of like, Gimli said they all had beards and that just seems kind of absurd and insane, but I love the idea that all the women have giant, you know, gorgeous looking beards as well. Doesn't mean that I hate what's going on, because what was going on was a little bit of fun. The king of the dwarves is so cool. He's got such gravitas, and his just voice is like, got this manly, deep, dark, kind of empowering, just, oh, it's just a, I don't know, it's just got this feeling, this gravitas. I've said gravitas twice now. I can't think of another word. It's just a good, rich, strong voice, and I feel like that's a kingly voice, a kingly voice. Every episode so far of this show has had a moment that makes me go like the huge like eye roll moment of like, oh boy, here we go, prequel moment. Da, da, da. Remember the thingy? Remember Lord of the Rings? Remember how much you loved Lord of the Rings? I'm like, yeah, I remember my favorite movies. Like, you don't have to do it like this, Rings of Power. Like, there are subtler ways to do it. Whereas when they did it in this episode with their big prequel kind of member berries kind of moment, I just kind of had to chuckle because it was just so on the nose. It was just so silly, but it was just a bit of fun. And he's like, we've mined this thing. It's the most amazing thing that we've ever mined. And maybe in a bit we're going to mine too deep and get some Balrogs, you know, maybe in a season finale or something. But at this moment, it's just a beautiful jewel that's as soft as silk, but as strong as iron. And, you know, and I'm like, Mithril. I've seen the movies, Mithril. But then they had to go that kind of extra prequel-y kind of thing where they're like, set it up, and then kind of explain it. As if we don't all know it's Mithril as soon as we see it shimmering in the wall. And he's like, oh, in our, Dwarven tongue, we call it whatever. But in your Elven tongue, it's Mithriling diggly spligishamy. And, he says a bunch of things after almost saying Mithril. And then everyone's like, oh, no. You've actually mispronounced Elvish. It is. And I'm like, yeah, Mithril. And he's like, Mithril. Remember berries? It's just, I don't know. It's so over the top and just like, I don't even know how to describe it. But I feel like they're wearing their prequel badge on their chest and they're proud of it. At least be proud. Don't be ashamed that you're doing very cheesy, corny prequel things. Like having a whole sequence where they just keep mumming about it, then it ends with him being like, Mithril! Like the thing from the thing you love. I feel like last week I would have hated this sequence. I really think it's just a mindset thing. I don't know. I think I'm just going to try and enjoy this show because as I'm saying that, I'm like, why didn't I hate that? That's kind of dumb and stupid. But I kind of had fun and I lolled. I had a bit of a chuckle to myself. I've had a drink. So we spend a bunch more time in Numenor. And last week, I didn't mention it because I thought Isildur was just, like a common name, like a John or a Jack. Or a third example of a name. I don't know why I forgot all names. Sam! His or and her, or they, whatever, names. It was like a common name back in Middle Earth times. The Second Age? Or are we in the Third Age? I don't know. But no, apparently the Isildur we met last week is Isildur. That Isildur. The one where Elrond's like, Isildur! Cast it into the fire! That Isildur. The Isildur. I don't know. I don't know why I didn't expect him to show up. Or this the idea that we're getting young, sexy Isildur! I don't know. It's just crazy to me. It's so weird. And I don't know. I just feel like because the elves age so much slower. And I know that the Numenor, they age kind of different too, but just the idea that they're in there, I don't know, in time, they've changed the timelines or something, or they haven't, I don't know, just very kind of odd, but we do get young sexy Isildur. And the only thing I want to talk about with young sexy Isildur is just the insanity, or just the high pressure workplace that he was in. He lets the rope slip for 3 seconds, and then immediately they remedy it. It's not like they're fighting another pirate ship or there's a big sea beast or he does it and someone falls off the crew and gets injured or dies. It appears to be that nothing happens of consequence in the direness. Nothing bad happens, yet he is still fired immediately. Dismissed immediately. If I was fired from my job for, doing something so little and then... it just baffled me. I'm like, that is high pressure, high stress, and that is way too much responsibility. You have to be 100% all the time. 100% all the time. He's like, you've done this 100 times. This is the one time you've not done it right. And I thought he'd give me a slap on the wrist. He's like, what do you not want to be here, boy? But immediately he's just like, you're fired. I'm sorry, what? But then not even that. The 3 guys, or the 2, I think, that remedy the situation immediately. So that's a cheeky little raise, or you get an extra glass of ale that night. But no, also fired. They fixed the issue so that there was no issue. I don't know. I don't like this Salem captain, man. Too strict, too hard, I don't know. Just, it was a lot to process and deal with. I'm like, I can't believe you got fired for something so small. Am I missing something? Maybe if you're a sailor and you're watching, you'll be like, well, actually, what he did was this, and, it's what it could mean in a situation. I understand. I don't know. I couldn't really get past that. I think, 3 scenes happened, and I still just kept thinking, that captain's a hard ass. I'm glad my boss isn't that hard. I'm stressed for Isildur. There was one moment that, in theory, I was, really impressed with, but I felt like the execution was a bit kind of I don't know, I just didn't like the decision. And it's when all the orcs are running through the forest and they're all like, rah, 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 we're orcs, and the elf and the boy with the magical dagger of fire and doom and destruction and the blue-dressed lady, his mum, they're all running, and the elf turning around slow motion, bam, 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 doing his whole Legolas shtick with the arrows, being shooty shooty. But there's a bit where an arrow from the orc comes and he catches it, puts it into his bow, and then he fires the arrow back. That is the coolest thing, ever. But I feel like the way they did it with the slow motion, it made the whole sequence feel a little silly. Like, it didn't make me go like, oh! Like, I feel like if I saw the arrow just go, whoosh, and you barely see it, and it just goes, whoosh, and then he pulls it back. I don't know, maybe use slow motion for like a fraction of that moment, but the whole moment just felt like kind of slow. And I think the issue is making the arrow so slow over the screen. When his reflexes don't feel fast and agile. It just like, he's just kind of moving with the slow-mo, and you can't tell that he's moving faster. The arrow just feels like it's not moving quick enough because of the slow-mo. And I think it's just a mix in my brain where it didn't register as cool until he's putting it in. I'm like, oh, that's cool. But that's such a cool moment where I want to be like, oh, that's so cool. Dude, he just caught an arrow out of the midair and he shot it back at the orc. I don't know. I just think there's different ways to do it. And it's just another one of those things where I'm just like, oh, the action sequences, the blood on the screen, the slow-mo at the wrong times. It's kind of like worrying me a little bit for when we get to like a big, like Battle of Helm's Deep kind of battle for this show. Still really liking all of Galadriel's stuff. For a second, I was a little afraid that all of her plot was going to be like, you, the Numenor, the men, fight with the elves against Sauron. And they're like, no. And I'm like, oh, that's really fake, forced, nothing tension. Because the only thing I know about any of this year or any of this at all is that the men, Isildur, Galadriel, at least Elrond, and the elves, like the men and the elves, they fight Sauron and the orcs. Like, that's the start of Lord of the Rings. Like, that's all I know about this. So I really hope this isn't like a whole season plot or a show plot where the men are all like, we don't want to do it, we don't like elves, we're super racist. And the elves are like, maybe try not to be so racist. Remember when you weren't racist? Please stop being racist. But it's just an episode plot, so it totally works for that. But during the episode, I was like a little bit worried and annoyed. I'm like, this is not really giving me any tension and, drama. It just feels a little bit forced and like, well, I know how it's going to end. But almost immediately, and by that point, at the end of the episode, they do a big like, who's going to join the battle? And then everyone's like, me, I will join the battle. I love a big conscription scene where everyone's like, I'll join up, I will fight for the fight that's going on. And it's empowering and epic and, I don't know, just very emotional. And I liked all of that. And the knowing that Numenor is going to go back to Middle-earth and do a whole thing. And we'll get Isildur in Middle-earth and all that stuff. Very exciting, a lot of fun. Last note on Numenor. I imagine he was probably in last episode, but the big blue-robed, grey-bearded man, I felt like he had a lot of presence this episode. Like, he does a big speech, he's like, men! A city of men! And he's like, I don't know, I just totally vibe with that guy. I'm like, this guy is a cool public speaker. I like this guy's whole, like, I don't know, his just whole vibe. He has a son, and the son does a little scene, a couple of scenes with this girl, and every time he talked, I'm like, this is the most modern man who's ever lived in Middle-earth. Like, everything he was saying was just like, just super modern flirting, and none of it worked. But I don't really care. It doesn't really matter, because his dad has gravitas, like the Dwarf King, just a gravitas and like a feeling where I'm like, I vibe this dude, and I like it. I like his beard. It's got good grey streaks going on. Overall, great app, had a lot of fun. Is it actually great? Probably not. I'm probably just in a good mood. And as I said, incredibly stressed about the finals tonight. Like, as soon as I finish this, I've got to edit and then straight to just stressing all night. I will enjoy the football. I won't. I'll be too stressed. I'll be too anxious. I'm just... If we win... Thanks for watching, guys. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and comment below. I'd love to know what everyone thought of episode 4 of The Rings of Power.